Hi, everybody. This is Bob Ost, and welcome to Theater Resources Unlimited. This is our Friday community gathering, and we've been doing this since April 17th, 2019, 2020, I'm sorry, as a response to COVID, the gift that keeps on giving. So here we are. We thought we were at the end of COVID, and we thought that things were going to be reopening again, and COVID, that sly devil, has come up with a new variant called Omicron, and I've even heard that there are other new variants that have come up as well. So as much as we'd hoped to be in a new normal or in a normal, we're still fighting this, and we're still trying to all stay healthy. Hopefully, all of us are getting our vaccinations and are getting our boosters. People who don't want to, for different reasons, I just want to remind you to think about other people. You may not be considering yourself at risk if you get it. You may think that it's just going to be mild for you, but do you really want to spread it to somebody who might be vulnerable? You don't know who's vulnerable and who's not. So have a conscience, and if at all possible, find it in your heart to get vaccination so that we can eventually reach herd immunity, which we've been striving for so long. So we've gone through so many steps in this terrible pandemic. All of us were shell-shocked for the first couple months, trying to figure out what to do and how to function in a pandemic and in isolation. So we talked a lot about isolation. We talked about creating art and continuing to be creative during this period of shutdown. And then lately, we've been talking a little bit more about making the transition into live theater. So today, we're really not going to talk that much about COVID, other than to mention the fact that we know it's there and it's really been a pain in the neck for us. I'm going to bring in an honored guest, somebody that I've admired for a long, long time, and his name is Eric Krebs. And almost everybody in theater knows who he is, and almost everybody in theater in some way has had him touch their career over the years, over many, many years that it's been. I'm going to bring him into the room right now, and we're going to talk a little bit about him and why he does what he does and how he started doing it. So without any further ado, or without any further intro, here is Eric Krebs. Eric, welcome to True. Welcome to the community gathering.
Thank you
I'm
very
so
much.
pleased that you're here with us, and so happy to have you. I know that you have an illustrious background, and I know that you would rather just chat than talk about all the many things that you've done. But the conversation that I'm planning today has to do with the journey that you've gone through, if it's okay with you. You've seen an evolution of theater from when you first started to what it is now. There have been so many changes. The easy question would be, how is off-Broadway theater different now than it was back when you started? But I think that it's not that simple. I think it's been a constant change, constantly changing environment for the development of work. Can we start off by finding out if you agree with that, basically?
It's a constantly changing environment. It's a constantly changing world of creative people that's very exciting for me to even be a part of. Do I understand how it's evolved over the years? I'm happy to talk about that a little bit. I think
Yes.
it mostly has to do with money. The first show I did off Broadway in New York was The Passion of Dracula at the Cherry Lane Theater in 1977, which was the same month that Frank Langella opened in Dracula on Broadway. We paid $625 a week for the Cherry Lane Theater. We paid about $40 a week for equity actors to do 7 or 8 performances a week. Basically, nobody made money on anything, which is how I came into off-Broadway, thinking that that's more or less the way it could and should be. We do it because it's our art. We hope it will work and impress people. And I must admit, in the last couple of months, I've been thinking to myself, Now, why do you do this, Eric? And is it important enough in the world to be doing this? So I've come a really long way from my bright-eyed, bushy-tailed years. When I was a 23-year-old, I went to the Cafe Chino on Cornelia Street. I was the last espresso machine runner of the Cafe Chino. And if you don't know what the Cafe Chino was, go read up. And I came in because of the enormous creativity and the enormous diversity and the enormous energy of everybody casting their lot into this world of creative, interesting, imaginative people that were not primarily ever interested in it for the money. That's been one of my great faults as a producer. That I'm always, I hope, as interested or more interested in what's creative about it, what's it saying, who's it connecting to, then is it going to make money? Because God knows I've had my share of shows that have not made money.
Well, let's start with what were your original goals when you came here at age 23? When you were a little boy, did you say, I want to be a theater owner when I grow up?
Never.
Never, of course.
Astrophysicist, solar scientist, and oh, by the way, I love poetry. I bet I could write some. Oh, look at that. The writing teachers in high school like what I write. Oh, look at that. There's a terrific show I went to called West Side Story. Maybe I could get involved in that world. Look at that. My high school's doing Our Town and they cast me in one of the roles. What a beautiful community. Look at that. Well, I guess I won't be a solar scientist after all. I'll head into this community of creative, connected people that always was so supportive and inclusive. And it was finding that community that led me into being first a poet, then a playwright who wanted his work produced, couldn't find anybody to produce it, so he produced it himself. And that's how I got here.
Well, we are very much supporters of what we refer to as self-producing artists. We have a whole coterie of self-producing artists. We always like to use the anagram SPA because producing yourself is so incredibly relaxing. So we have SPA. We have people that are in SPA, and in fact, probably most of the people in the room are self-producing artists as well. So I think it's very heartening for them to hear that's how you started and that's where you started. I also thought that it was silly to wait around to find somebody to produce me, and I started producing myself. That was in the early 90s. What was it that made you decide that you could run a theater? You took on some really big projects, some really big things for somebody that wasn't interested in it for the money.
I began at age 19 going up to Provincetown, Massachusetts, and going out on the wharf to see where Eugene O'Neill started in the Provincetown Playhouse. I was an intern there for the summer. I used to work there from 3 p.m. until midnight or 1, and then work as a short order cook at the Provincetown Inn from 7 a.m. till 3, 7 days a week for a whole summer. And boy, did I prefer the theater to the short order cooking. So I ended up in Provincetown meeting some people, and the next summer I went back. There were 2 guys opening a space they were going to call the Act 4 at the Gifford House on Bradford Street, and we dug out the basement to get enough height to have a coffee house theater. That was my 20th summer year. And I actually got into, I called it producing because that's, I guess, what we were doing. We just didn't know it. And we started doing plays there. That's how I got into having a theater. Then a year or 2 later, when the 2 guys I was in business with, that's a euphemism, the 2 guys that I was in theater with were standing at with screwdrivers at each other's bellies saying, come on, take one step further. I said, I can do better than this. And I went back to New Brunswick, New Jersey, where I was a graduate student in a PhD program in English. I rented a $500 a month former pharmacy, stripped it out, and began Brecht West on about $2,500. which like now would probably be $25,000, but still the point. And we started doing plays with local people, with a few people I knew in New York, a few people I'd met in Provincetown who would come out and do a major role. They used to make $15 a performance and bus fare. And among those who came out to Brecht West were Al Pacino directing Rats, John Casale and Ann Wedgeworth in a play called Soon Jack November, because they just loved the theater. It was like the scruffy old days of off-Broadway, and there they came. That's how I got into producing.
But there sounds like there's something that you knew how to do that a lot of us don't. You
No,
seem to know.
no, I knew how to do nothing.
But you converted a space. You must have figured something out very
I
quickly.
said, there's a space with a for rent sign. Let's go in and see what it looks like. Oh, it's for rent. It's a pharmacy. Well, we could clear that out. And so we did. Well, I guess we need lighting. How do you do that? Well, up in Provincetown, they used to use those little clip-on lights with aluminum foil around them on zip cord. Well, we could do that. So we made a lighting system for a couple $100 out of clip-on lights. Well, what are we going to do? I don't know. What play do you like? Why don't we do some important stuff like Dutchman by Leroy Jones? That'll be a real crowd pleaser. Or maybe we can do a Beckett. You know, one of the earliest playwrights we ever had there was a young guy named Terrence McNally with 2 one-act plays called Botticelli and Cuba C. And he came out and we did his plays for next to nothing. But I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know about fundraising. I didn't know about not-for-profit. I just kind of did it. And when somebody said, well, you should look into the not-for-profit funding of the New Jersey State Council on the Arts, I said, what's that? By the way, some of you will remember, I got to go back to this moment. Guy named Fred Vogel. Fred Vogel founded the Commercial Theater Institute. But before that, he had FEDAPT, Foundation for the Extension and Development of the American Professional Theater. And I think Joe Malillo, who you may know through Brooklyn Academy of Music, was working for him at the time. He came out and looked at my little theater I had in New Jersey, and he really set me up with the following conversation. And I give this to all of you who would start a small theater. He said, interesting that you want to do this. What's your budget? What's your mission? What's your staffing? What's your audience? How are you going to market it? What's your promotion? How are you going to deal with unions? How are you going to deal with healthcare? How are you going to deal with insurance? And how are you going to get people in to see your show? When you have all that worked out, then talk to me again.
It's interesting. Fred was a very good friend of mine. Fred was actually the first guest I've ever had at True.
Well, his comment to me was
28 years ago.
One of the best things that was ever said to me, because he was right.
Well, Fred was the one that leaned over to me after an evening in my living room with people who had gathered because they wanted to talk about how hard a time they were having.
Nothing has changed.
He leaned over to me and said, Bob, you have people in this room who are producing commercially and not-for-profit. You can't do that. I said, what do you mean? He said, they don't talk the same language. I didn't listen to him. It was basically, to me, producing was producing. Basically, everybody over the past 20 years definitely crosses the line between the two areas.
And that is one thing that has evolved in the past 20 or 25, 30 years is outside commercial enhancement of developing projects in the not-for-profit sector. A very complex and important creative part of what's going on. And it happens all the time. The trouble is, if you don't find an outside producer with money, oftentimes your show can't get done. So you have to choose a certain kind of show that a commercial producer is willing to take a chance on. So that determines somewhat the material that people can present, or produce yourself and assume that you're going to have a great time doing it and nobody's going to much care about it.
And you may not even break even.
No, you won't break even. You will not break even.
Okay. So let's go back to your history, because I still think that you're a driving force in theater. You really are somebody that a lot of people look up to. So that Brecht, what's it called? Brecht West?
Brecht West.
Brecht West. Did that evolve into George Street? Because I know that George Street.
Kind of yes, kind of no. I ran it for a couple of years. Then I left New Brunswick, went into New York to begin to work off Broadway, and I turned it over to somebody else who ran it for a couple of years. And then I realized what regional theater was as opposed to off Broadway and off Broadway in New York. And I said, Rutgers University will support a theater if it's done out there with care and attention. So I went back because I was still a graduate student. I never did finish my PhD in English literature. I went back and started a theater while I was still a graduate student at George Street Playhouse, and made it work. Again, believe it or not, I rented a supermarket, a former supermarket, and the rent was, I think, about $1,000 or $1,200 a month for a ramshackle old building. We got theater seats from a movie house down the block that was going to be demolished for the new Johnson & Johnson headquarters. We got 250 theater seats out of there, moved them up in a van, probably my station wagon as I think of it. And that's how we built it. So yes, Brecht West was sort of a precursor, but not the same organization as George Street.
Where did you find these people that you were working with? How did you find people to indulge you in this wild fantasy?
As we all know this, I feel so much of what I'm saying is what all of this group, the wonderful group, already knows, which is you hang on to every contact and you use it as you can and let them know what they're doing, and maybe they'll come and help you. One of the earliest people to come out to George Street Playhouse in New Brunswick, New Jersey, 45 years ago, was somebody who had known me very, very slightly from a reading in New York. And he heard that I was doing a theater in New Jersey, and he said he wanted to come out and help. Dan Lauria. Dan Lauria, who's now, of course, played Lombardi on Broadway. And he came out 45 years ago and helped hang lights and put up insulation because he thought the idea of starting a theater was really cool. So how do I find those people? That oftentimes they show up because they need the community. They are drawn to a community, as I was all the way back in high school, because the community of theater is so wonderful. Doesn't always pay well, which is why I went into academics and became a professor for 50 years to pay my way. So I always had the two careers. But most of you already know that. You have to make your way in something else. Am I answering your question?
Absolutely. I'm just going to keep moving the narrative forward.
Please go ahead.
So what happened between George Street and how did you come to start creating the John Houseman and the Douglas Fairbanks?
Well, when you're in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and you're trying to do shows with professional performers, you always need rehearsal space. So I went up and down the space on 42nd Street, right near Playwrights Horizons, which Bob Moss was starting to turn into a Theater Row setup.
What year was that?
Oh, Lord, 74.
Okay.
75. So I met Bob Moss then, and he was turning one of those 99-seat porno houses into Playwrights Horizons. And he said, down the block, just across the exit from the Lincoln Tunnel, there's a guy named Bill Condren who's taken over some of the real estate. They built a couple of shells for theater, but they don't know what they're doing with it, and there's nobody there to take it. So I got in touch, went over, was actually looking for rehearsal space, and ended up renting the concrete shell that became the Douglas Fairbanks Theater. Did I know what I was doing? Of course not. Did I know anything about architects and expediters and permits and public assembly permits and everything you can think? Of course not. Did I know
I think this is where I'm supposed to come in and tell the room, don't try this at home.
Well, no, you have to try it. Everybody has to try it.
Well, hopefully with the support of people that can tell them, but, like Fred gave you the list of things you needed to think about.
And the difference is money. I did, believe it or not, the first installation of the Douglas Fairbanks Theater, which for those who may not know, was a lovely 199-seater right near Dyer Avenue on 42nd Street. I think my rent was about $6,000 a month. And my complete renovation cost, and we did the renovation for the most part, was $125,000. We found the seats at a used seating place. We lugged them in ourselves. We did everything, the building, the painting, the dressing rooms, the walls.
How many of you were there? Because this sounds so impossible. How many people did you have helping you?
We probably had about, if this was not free labor, by the way, it was just extremely well designed and very simple. And we paid everybody. I don't know at that time what it was, $5 or $7 an hour or something. And there were 5 or 6 people who worked on it about 4 months, and we got it done.
Wow.
And then,
am I right though? Was that the step? Was it from George Street went to Douglas Fairbanks and John Houseman?
Yeah, George Street Playhouse, of course, was the not-for-profit still going that I stayed with till 1986. But in around 84, I went and found the space that became the Douglas Fairbanks, took a long-term lease on it, raised some money through my first limited liability company. The wonderful agent Milton Goldman, who some of you may remember, happened to be from New Brunswick, New Jersey, and he was introduced to me because I was working in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And he introduced us to any number of people, including Douglas Fairbanks Jr. Put up a wad of money to help make the thing happen, and we named it the Fairbanks. Just the connections. It's all about the connections, but you all know that. I mean, that's what it is.
Well, we may know it, but it's good to hear it.
And then after that, a couple of years later, they had the great big shell where the Houseman was down the block, which became a 287-seat theater. It was supposed to be a dance theater, was actually built for a dance theater that couldn't raise any money to make it happen. And so I more or less did the same thing on the Houseman, although that was rehearsal spaces and studios downstairs, offices upstairs, and a 287-seat grander theater. And that was about $1 million and $1.25 million. I actually mortgaged my house to be able to borrow some of that money, and almost lost my house a couple of years later when it wasn't paying its way. And we don't talk about that in this very house where I'm sitting now. But that's what I did.
What you did for love.
What I did for love.
Yeah.
So now here's a question. I really hope maybe we can have some interaction on this, or people will go on the chat or email me directly. What we do for love. Okay, I did that for love at 23, 29, 38, 42, while everybody else was in the world of banking and finance and making their lots and lots and lots of money. And sometimes I think to myself, Eric, that was a really big mistake. You should have made some money and then been able to go in this as an adult at age 45, not having to struggle every step of the way. And I mean, this is now way off track.
That's okay.
Given the world we're in, the homeless, the poverty-stricken, the other issues we're watching, the impossible ways in which Black people are squashed down in our culture, by our culture. And I think to myself, was doing theater that seemed so important every month really a good life choice? I'm actually having that dialogue with myself every week, every day. And I don't have an answer. It's just, that's where you get when you're 77 and looking at a life. And I don't have an answer for that. Why do we do theater? I'd love to hear your responses.
Okay, so everybody, actually, you can do a virtual hand raise, and then I can call on you, or you can put a question into the chat, and we'll call on you. But Eric wants to have a dialogue, so talk to him.
Well,
I will tell you, Eric, that I go through very much the same thing that you're talking through. I did have a career. I had a career in advertising, but I spent a lot of time in theater, and I've spent the last 25 years running True. And I do feel good about it. I think there were other things I could have done. I feel like I've accomplished things. Eric, you've touched many, many lives. I'm sure people have told you this before, and it still probably hasn't stuck. You still continue questioning it. You did what you were supposed to do. That's what you were here for. And there's something within you that knew that, and it just drove you forward. It sounds like you were incredibly driven to do what you did. And to do it without even wondering whether you should be doing anything else
without thinking about
without thinking about it. Yeah, you did. So don't you think maybe something within you was responding to a call?
I'm very aware I've touched a lot of lives, both in teaching and in theater. I always work out of the point of view of it is the giver who should be thankful. And I am very thankful I've been able to help along the way. But hey, if I've got a space and it's not being used, go do something there. Or if you're calling me up about how to produce something and you don't quite know, well, ask me. I'll be happy to tell you. I've been there. I mean, it's not brain surgery. It's just being humane in our wonderful circle of theater people. I don't quite know why I'm talking to this group. Half of them probably have more experience than I do. And it's sort of like, but I'm delighted to.
It's different experience.
I'm delighted to pretend.
You're what they call a mover and a shaker. And Michael's going to shake his hand at me if I don't let him talk. Go ahead, Michael. Michael Colby.
Oh, yeah. I feel like Eric should see a double feature of The Great McGinty beyond It's a Wonderful Life. I feel like we do what we need to do. And I feel like Eric has affected and helped so many lives and helped promote art. And I know I'm very grateful to him. And if you want to rerun your whole life, you can do that and question this and that, but you've achieved a great deal, and that's what's important.
Thank you, Doctor. I agree. I know it's important. I'm just...
Mr. The Great McGinty, the Preston Sturges film.
I know of it, but I don't know it.
Well, it's about a director who feels he's wasted his life working in comedies, and then he goes and sees
Sullivan's Travels. That's why we're confused.
I'm sorry, I meant Sullivan's Travels.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, they're both by Preston Sturges, but in Sullivan's Travels, he goes to this camp where a lot of unfortunates are watching his movie and laughing and feeling good about themselves.
Yep.
So today is part true community gathering and part this is your life. I'm just in that moment, being at the back of a house behind the last row, never sitting in the audience, just always being around the audience and watching the response is, yes, one of the highlights of not only producing, but of my life and the joy in my life, saying, I made that. And that's really wonderful.
Richard Rogers.
Michael, other people. I have a lot of hands raised. So let's go to Marty Goldman. Marty Goldman. Did you want to come into the room, or did you want to? Okay.
No, I'm actually doing what you said you were thinking about your choice. I'm 60 years old, and I had a whole different career in real estate. And my wife has discovered acting in the same way. We're the total non-theater people beginning to get into this community, and it's wonderful that it exists. So I think there are a lot of different paths that people take into this. And I'm starting in a different world. And some of it drives me absolutely crazy because I run a business, and theater is not a business, but it is. And it's crazy the way people operate, but it's wonderful. And I think there are lots of different paths, and I'm wonderful. Yeah.
If I may, for a moment, one of the great frustrations in my life in the last couple of months is really wealthy, oldish, white guys who've never done theater coming and saying, I would like to present my show and I have the money to do it. And I think it's the best thing that's been written in years. And I've had that scenario at least 3 or 4 times in the last 2 months. My only response is, you don't know what you're doing yet. Mm-hmm. Go slowly and don't throw your money around because everybody will take it and you will lose it. We just had a show at the new Theater 555 on 42nd Street called The Turtle on a Fence Post, capitalized between $1.5 million and $2 million by a very nice and well-meaning old rich white guy, younger than me, by the way, so I better watch what I say. And he was a lovely guy, but he just wouldn't say no, and he didn't know what he was doing, and he thought he knew how to do it, and he took a terrible bath. So Why am I telling you that, Marty? Go slowly. Call me anytime. I'll tell you anything I know.
Well, no, I appreciate that.
Okay.
I'm working at a nonprofit, so I'm learning that. I'll let other
Gallery players.
gallery players.
Yeah.
And
Oh, great. Yeah,
I'm learning from the ground up. I'm like a kid in a candy store learning a new
there
thing.
you are. It's a way to do it.
So Eric,
It's a lot of fun.
how is your voice holding up?
It's fine. I don't mind going on.
Okay. So
Yesterday I had no voice whatsoever, but now this is okay.
Okay. So Marty, I'm going to ask you to turn your video off. I'm going to ask Arlene to come in and talk to Eric. Arlene Corsano.
Oh, uh-oh.
There you are.
There I am. Hi, Eric. I just love your story. And I'm thinking, gee, maybe I could have done that, but no, I couldn't have.
Yeah, actually, it's funny, Eric. I mean, all that you're saying and you're questioning it. Everybody else in the room is just as much questioning their choices. We all make choices.
We do our whole lives, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I've had some questions. I've been questioning it. For me, the question is whether I sacrifice myself as a playwright to run true. But I feel like I'm fulfilling a purpose, so I'm actually content with my choice.
But I had, but I think it was best as I got through this to do it the way I did. I became a teacher first because my mother said that's a good thing to do. No matter what happens, you can teach. And where I taught, I had to write a play or do a play with the students every year. And I chose to write my own. And
Wonderful.
I enjoyed doing that, writing around what kids I had, what talents I had. And making sure everybody got to do, as much or as little as they wanted. So I just enjoyed that. And then I retired at 51. And for the past over 20 years, I started with cabaret acts when I saw somebody doing something that she was a big name singer at one point when I was younger, and she was doing something really terrible. And I said, I got to fix this. And I did. And I did. They did it in Japan. They did all of it in this area, in Manhattan and Harlem and the Bronx. And so I was happy with that. And then I met a woman through her that is a songwriter who is not
Well, there's an interesting story. How do you think Rosemary would feel about what Eric is saying? Does she look at herself and question her choices?
Oh, no. She knew what she wanted, and she had the patience and to go through what she did. I mean, from a very poor Black farmer's daughter in Arkansas to coming here and waiting 10 years to work. She wanted to be a singer, really. And then her songwriting hit, and she wrote for like Elvis and Nat King Cole and Sarah Vaughan. I mean, multiple songs for them. And she is the one who told me, because I wrote something after I retired. I was doing all different things in a little newspaper, and people started calling her up because a lot of people lived in North Jersey that were musicians or singers, and they all saw this. And she says, "Oh, you're going to make me famous again." And she kept telling people every time she introduced me, she says, "Arlena," she'd call me Arlena. "Arlena is going to make me famous." And I said, "I can't do that." And
Arlene, I have other people waiting to ask.
Well, anyway, I did exactly, and I'm still doing that, and not making money, but it's fine because I have a pension, a teacher's pension.
Hey, I never made money working for True. I mean, I won't tell you what I take a week. I had other sources of income though. Okay. So Arlene, can I bring Glenn Borders in now? Glenn, are you there?
I am here.
Hello,
Eric. Good to see you again.
Howdy.
I first met you.
Uh-oh.
Way back. I was working at Playwrights Horizons, and we moved Driving Miss Daisy to the Houseman Theater.
Right.
And I was the crew chief, and I moved it there. And you were around a lot, and you and I just started chatting. Every week we just chat, and you became an inspiration, and I would just go to your office and look for you, and you were always just so open. The door was open. You were such an inspiration because you allowed me to just come in and pick your brain and talk to you about just stuff, and that always stood out to me from my entire life, which is when I found out you were here tonight. I had to be here, and thank you for that, because
That's
one of
very,
the
very
things,
important for me to hear.
yeah, because I was talking about shows that I wanted to do, and you did say, do it yourself. And so now I'm producing. I'm part of the master program. I've done my show. I told you the last time I saw you, remember the last time we saw one another? The last blackout that happened, and I came to your theater, and you had to shut down that day. I was coming to see your show.
I Spy at St. Clement's.
Yeah, exactly. And I hadn't
Right.
seen you in years, and I had no idea you were there. And we kind of stood on the stairs and talked for a while, and it was just very cool to see you again. And again, you've been such an inspiration to me. And thank you for all you do. And I'm sure everyone feels the exact same way. We even did a sketch show, Midsummer Night's Scream, I think it was.
Oh yeah.
We did pretty good too with that. You know, it was fun.
Along the way.
Yeah.
The way.
Yeah. But thanks so much. It's so good to see you.
I've had a hand in producing, I suppose, between 200 and 300 shows, all the way from Midsummer Night's Scream to Laughing Liberally on Stage to Tuli du Magude. Does anybody remember Papi Nongena back in the 70s?
No.
That was a wonderful South African play. The woman who played Papi Nongena at the Fairbanks Theater is still a friend. In fact, I heard from her the other day from South Africa. I've been assisting her in her daycare center food programs for her community in Soweto.
Very cool.
35 years later, 40 years later, here she still is. Anyway, not me. Let's talk about you.
Well, I want to bring Greg in, but first, I want to go to a point that when you look at your career, what is the word that you use to describe who you were for all these years? Is it producer? It was producer that what you most
you mean
with?
The description of what I do?
Yeah.
I live in the theater. I live in the theater.
Whatever that presents, you address
Carpet has to be vacuumed. You vacuum the carpet. If somebody has to be picked up at the airport, you figure it out. If it costs too much to deliver something, as something recently came up, it was $750 to deliver it from South Jersey. I said, don't deliver it. I'll come pick it up. It's only an hour and 15 minutes each way. Save $750. That's one aspect of what I do. The other aspect of what I do, every time I meet somebody who has an interesting project, I want to hear about it. I met an Iraqi rap American kiddo a couple of months ago, and I said, wow, it sounds great, whatever it is you're doing. Why don't you come do a night at my new space, and let's all look at it together. That's exciting. I love to do that. Now, please don't all ask me to give you the space for your new project.
I've already asked. You said no.
But I have to support it. It's very expensive.
Yeah.
But how do I describe what I've done? Well, two things come to mind. I'm not a big time producer. I'm not a Kevin McCullum. I'm not a Bob Wankel. I'm not a Roy Furman. I don't have that kind of resources or that kind of ability to raise money. So I always come back to the notion of my favorite Emily Dickinson poem. I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Shh, don't tell them. They'll banish us. How tiresome to be somebody preaching all day to an admiring bog. How something or other, how like a frog. And I kind of position myself as, I've never been a big major producer. I can't get a Broadway house if I want one. I don't raise 12, 14, 18, 28 million dollars, but I've lived in this community, and that's why I'd rather have us have it back and forth talking than have you listen to me bloviate, because we're all in it doing the same thing.
Well,
Bob, can I just say one last thing, and then I'll turn off my video.
Okay.
Your video's never off, Glenn.
Thanks, Eric. The Driving Miss Daisy I'm talking about is the original Driving Miss Daisy with Morgan Freeman and Dana Ivey. Yep. We did it first at Playwrights Horizon, and then we moved down the street.
Yep.
So it's not an offshoot. This was the original baby. Yeah.
Thanks.
You think Morgan Freeman will have a future?
He's promising.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bob. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Eric.
What I never got to say, and I know Greg is waiting to come in and ask you or say something or to talk with you, but
Take all the
what I
time you
never,
want, Bob.
what
Take all
I
the-
never, thanks, Greg. What I never got to ask you was what was it like when Theater Row came in and took over your block? Well, that was a big shift for you, wasn't it?
Yeah. I ran the Fairbanks 25 years and the Houseman 23 years. People say to me, man, you must have done really well on those buildings. No, I didn't. The real estate interest did.
Although let's actually say that one of your theaters was the home of nonsense.
Yeah,
Sure.
nonsense. And it was fine. And every dime I ever took in, I put into productions that I lost money on. I've never taken money out of my theater career. I've always lived from my teaching. Believe it or not, I can honestly say I never took a paycheck from my theater career, ever. You're probably astonished to hear that, because everything I earned, I do a next show. Little Ham, which was at the Houseman. I lost stupidly because one doesn't put one's own money in, $270,000.
And that was
Well,
such an odd situation, because when it first opened, it got this great review in the Times, and then
The
when it
same
opened,
reviewer came back and panned it. And not only that, contradicted himself on at least 3 issues specifically. Anyway, let's not go there.
but we were all stunned. Everybody thought that it was a sure thing, because you were opening it commercially with the Times review that was so solid, and then yes, the schmuck goes and blows it.
There's a story there, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on it right now.
Okay.
The only thing I'm upset that I never did is I didn't punch him in the mouth. I went to Encores about 2 years later, and I passed Bruce Weber in the lobby. And as I walked by him, he said, "Oh, hello, Mr. Krebs. Are you still talking to me?" I wish I had punched him in the mouth at that moment. I would have been now a real legendary figure rather than just another guy.
No, you're a legendary figure. Don't miss.
But I didn't punch him in the mouth.
Not.
I didn't punch him in the mouth. I should
Okay.
have. Any of you friends of his, you can tell him that story. It's okay with me.
I don't know.
What was it like leaving the Houseman
Yeah.
in Fairbanks? Well, a lot of you don't know that this was already 18 years ago when we left those. It seems like yesterday, but it's a long time. It was okay because it had gobbled my life up for 23 years. It had given me an enormous number of wonderful contacts, many of which I still have, and made people think I was a grand poobah or something. And I just knew that it was going to be a real estate deal at some point, and it was. The real estate those 2 theaters sat on was sold for $110 million to the related companies that put up the grand Mima building that is there. And as a part of it, the new Signature Theater, which is exactly where the old Houseman was. So the whole thing was, it's how life goes. I know that. Leases expire, relationships end. It's okay. I don't know. Is that an answer?
It's an answer. Yeah,
It was sad. They were beautiful theaters.
Do you think that Theater Row changed the business of off-Broadway in any way?
Do I think that Theater Row, the long-term development issue, or Theater Row, the current building for the arts building that hosts what they call Theater Row?
Well, actually, the original one.
Thank you, because I don't wish to talk about the other particularly. Theater Row was just a wonderful, enlightened, fabulous, far-looking, imaginative idea. Bob Moss looked at these cruddy old places, said they should be theaters again, because they started as theaters when Irving Maidman had several small theaters there. And it was a wonderful vision. I don't know what else to say about it, except, good for him, and it transformed the neighborhood, and it gave rise to my theaters down the block, which gave rise to the $110 million sale to related companies, and the new signature, which is quite wonderful. So it was just a visionary.
Now, have I missed any steps after theater, after your show, your theaters closed? What was your next endeavor? What was the next thing that you did?
Well, for about 4 or 5 years, I just had an office over on 46th Street, tried to do things, produce stuff out of town, produce stuff in various spaces.
You produced something with Randall Reggett. You produced Electra, didn't you?
Actually, Randall Reggett produced something with me, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There you go.
I went to McCarter Theater in Princeton and saw Electra the last weekend of its run in 1999, late September, I think. 30 producers had turned down the idea of moving it. And as my wife often says to me, I knew you were really going to get involved because you stayed awake. And I did. And I picked up the rights and I moved it to Broadway. We opened in about December 10th. Why, who would not open Greek Tragedy on Broadway in December? I mean, of course, that's what you do. But I moved it the way that I can move it. And now here's part of my reputation and what I say to everybody. I moved a 10 character, I think it was 10, with one set that didn't move, with the designers from England and the stars Zoe Wanamaker from England. I moved it to a Broadway house for an $800,000 capitalization. And I opened it for $575,000. That sounds crazy, of course, but why? Because I said, no. Here's how we're going to do it. First thing, I took a theater that was only available for 8 weeks. Pardon me. I said, okay, we'll go there for 8 weeks and see what happens. So I got a really good deal on the theater. Then I took the set from McCarter Theater, and they were partners in it, by the way. They contributed so many of the technical stuff and the rehearsal time and so on. We took the set from McCarter Theater. Wasn't a union built set, had to be passed through a union shop. Oh, Paper Mill Playhouse. Retooled the staircase and stamped it all union made so it could get loaded into the theater. I told the cast, which was coming from all over the place, and the designers, we get into the theater, we load in on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We don't work over the weekend because it costs more. Monday, we dry tech. Tuesday, the company comes on, having just finished this run 8 weeks ago in Princeton. Wednesday, we have our tech. Thursday afternoon, we have our dress. And Thursday night, we play our first preview for a paying audience. They began on Tuesday. They performed on Thursday. It's astonishing. And everybody said, let's do it. The other thing I said was to every agent, same deal for everybody. Absolute minimum until we break even, then we can talk about it. I need the entire cast to come back. If anybody doesn't come, I can't do it. Everybody works for minimum. We brought that in for $575 and we paid back in 3 weeks.
What year was that?
What
year was that? I'm sorry.
99.
Okay.
And it was nominated for 3 Tony Awards. And then I knew everything. And I knew exactly what I was doing. So I brought in another show the same year, It Ain't Nothing But the Blues, which was a Crossroads Theater in New Brunswick production that went to the New Victory Theater that got a great review in the New York Times. And I moved it to Broadway for $950,000. How did I move a musical to Broadway? First, I found out the only available theater at that moment was what? Vivian Beaumont Theater, that the wonderful Bernie Gersten said, boy, if you can get it here, we'll take it, because there's nothing to do to come in for a while, because they had a big show that tanked. Again, the whole thing was already together. We moved it in for what it was. I believe it was $950,000 is what we produced it for. And we lost it all, of course.
Well, there's some stories though. I mean, I did want to get to some of your commercial stuff. Greg, you're welcome to talk to Eric now. Hello.
How could I possibly top that? Seriously.
Don't top it. Just participate.
That's what I'm here for. I'll keep it brief since I do have to run in a little bit, but I will ask, since I am in your 23-year-old shoes at the moment, writing, trying to find a job, because I've literally applied everywhere that you've worked with. And also for the people that might watch this on YouTube and are in a similar position as I am, what is like your best piece of advice for a young professional, a young scrappy guy like myself, or a young scrappy girl who wants to be a producer, or any, business professional in this industry?
I'm gonna answer for him, and then he's gonna answer again for himself. He's already said the best advice I've heard, which is don't do it for the money, do it for love. Do it because you love it and you want to do it. I know that you have to find a way of earning money, but that was the first message he gave to all of us. So, okay, Eric, to you now.
Thank you.
Well, any contact you meet, hold on to. Anybody in this group who you think may be doing an interesting project that you would like to care about, volunteer some time or some effort. I heard today about the War Brides, the Alzheimer's musical, the 4 short plays for Planet in Peril, and so on. I'm thinking, boy, those are projects that I'd like to hear more about. And if you like one of them, call up who's ever doing it and say, I don't know who you are, you don't know who I am, but can I help you do it? I make my living as a bartender right now, so you don't have to pay me for the first whatever. Let's see where it goes. Latch on to people, give them a hand, help them out with what they need, and that will come back to you in spades. That's one thing. Next thing, find some way to make a living that doesn't consist of theater. Any number of ways that can be done. I know actors who are legal paraprofessionals who drop in and out as they can when they have time, and that kind of thing. There's no easy answer to that. You got to figure that one out for yourself. And here's another thing, sort of fun to talk about. I have recently met a 98-year-old composer in Queens, woman. If you go to her website, you can get to know her. She's extraordinary. Her name is Julie Mendel. Go to juliemendel.com. She is still writing. She worked for Frank Lesser in the 50s. She had Nat King Cole record her music. She's 98 years old. She works every day at her piano. She never became a star. Lots of reasons. The one of which she thinks mostly is because she was a woman, and is even told, I can't believe you're a woman. You write like a man. And I am now trying to get on stage a musical review of a kind of a bio piece of her life and her work. It's so exciting to me to think that can happen before she passes. She's 98 years old. Nobody has a clue who she is. But man, she loved her stuff. She had a viola concerto played recently at a festival in Venice. She had a flute thing done up at the University of Washington. She has hundreds and hundreds of musical pieces, and she still works every day to get them out there and keep up her contacts. So there's hope. If you're only 23, you have at least 70 years left until you hit the big time.
Godspeed to her, and thank you very much.
Yeah. Let me just say, life is very long, and it may have, I just said to somebody today, Walt Whitman didn't get a poem published till he was 37. And who's the other person I just talked? Oh, Tom Paine didn't come to America till he was 37. And he was total disaster in England before then. The reason I brought this up is my friend who I'm helping is 37 and kind of crushed by life. And I'm saying, look, you got a whole life in front of you. So it's a long time coming.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Greg. I'm going to. We've now gone an hour, which is more the time than you thought you were going to be able to. So I thank you so much for that. I appreciate all your time, and I appreciate all the generous way that you shared so much with people.
I'm gonna go off with one comment.
Okay.
I feel honored that I was able to share time with this creative, committed, lovely bunch of theater family people. It's not like I'm teaching you anything. We just all keep going together. So thank you.
You're welcome. And just want to remind the room and remind my YouTube viewers that we've been doing this basically as a haven for people during COVID. And now that we're coming out of COVID, we're going to continue doing it virtually because we've developed an audience, a community that is well beyond New York. And I can't do this live and still have people from Seattle and California and Malaysia and Australia and London and Barcelona. So we're going to keep doing this. In order to keep doing this, we have bills to pay. So everything's free if you can't afford anything. But if you can afford something, do consider giving us a donation. And I think if Joe Nelms is in the room, he's going to put our donation link in the chat. I think it's True Donate, TRU Donate at trudonate.com. There it is, 3 times. Thanks, Joe. So again, Happy New Year to everybody. Consider starting off the new year with a little gift to True if you can. And if you can't, we still love you and we still welcome you and we're still happy to have you as part of the community. Thank you, Eric Krebs, for being with us.
Can I get back on for a second?
Absolutely, you're here.
When is your benefit?
Benefit is March 20th.
Okay, because I have an empty theater called Theater 555 because we just postponed Romeo and Bernadette again, which is the musical I'm working on. I was going to invite your benefit if it wants to go live to my theater, but okay, not this time.
Yeah, we're virtual. We've got it all planned for virtual. We've got a whole team of people. Thank you so much, though. I appreciate that. I'll find some other way to use your theater.